Hey Adventure, so today is going to be a video about basically my thoughts on science fiction as a genre. I've talked quite a bit about science fiction in the past, and especially this past month has been pretty much every Thursday video has been science fiction related, and I appreciate that. I don't have any problem with doing that, but it's kind of interesting to me that that's what has happened. Anyways, I'm not really going to go through my history with science fiction other than to just briefly use it to set the context of what I'm talking about. And basically, for a lot of years, I did not like science fiction. I did not think science fiction was a genre that I liked, with maybe some exceptions. And of course, like Star Wars has always been a favorite of mine, and so that one was like, well, that's science fiction, but it's also really fantasy. There's a lot of fantasy aspects to it, and so I said, well, maybe it's the science fantasy that I like, and not the science fiction. But then I also remember reading things like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or War of the Worlds, or The Giver, or even Hunger Games, and stuff like that. Books that are definitely a lot more science fiction than they are science fantasy. And I remember enjoying those books, and there's definitely other ones that I'd read as well. And so that there was kind of this reconciliation that hadn't happened and hadn't been able to, and I couldn't make happen in my mind of, do I like science fiction or is it just certain books? Because pretty much all the books that I was reading in the science fiction genre, I was enjoying for the most part. And since starting BookTube, I have spent a lot more time reading science fiction, as you can see from the videos that I've done recently. And I'm not well read in the genre still. I'm not well read in fantasy genre at all either. But I am better read in fantasy than I am in science fiction. But I'm starting to become a little bit better read in science fiction than I previously was, and that's helpful. That's helping me to see and to learn a lot of about my opinions and my thoughts on the science fiction genre. In this video, I've been really thinking about it for a long time, and using it to kind of as a way to make sure that I'm paying attention to my own thoughts on the science fiction genre as I read more and more science fiction books. And one of the things that I've constantly noticed about myself is I don't care for Star Trek. And Star Trek being the most science fiction, that's one that I've gone back to, and I've tried to get interested in it. I've watched some of the original series, I've watched some of Next Generation, I've watched some of Enterprise. I don't remember, that might be the only 3 series that I've tried from it, but each of them I have tried watching, and I've enjoyed some aspects of them, but every single one of them has not kept my interest nearly long enough for me to even make it through one season of the series. And so I always ended up saying, okay, it was like a unintentional DNF. I just never went back and picked it back up type thing. And because of that idea that, oh, this is science fiction, this is the acclaimed science fiction. And so if that's what everybody considers as the best science fiction, then this genre is not for me. And that idea persisted in my mind until I started BookTube, and until I started intentionally reading more and more science fiction books. And I've come to realize that, one, I do enjoy the science fiction genre, especially within the science fantasy. I really enjoy science fantasy with things like Dune or Star Wars. But there's lots of science fiction that I enjoy as well. It's still not my favorite genre, and I've definitely have had a journey to get to the point where I enjoy and appreciate it as much as I do now. There's specific books that have marked my journey in science fiction and made me enjoy it more. And if you go watch my science fiction videos that I have been making recently, those would help you to know that those more prominent books in my mind and stuff a little bit better. But that's not all that I want to talk about with this video. There's a couple more aspects here that I think have influenced why I have had such a hard time with the science fiction genre. And so, to start with, science fiction tends to be cool. It tends to be like scientific, which is, I like science, I like learning things. And so that aspect is something that I find cool and that I find interesting. But herein, I think, lies my biggest issue with science fiction. While I do like it, there's something about it that I don't really think is fun in the way that fantasy is fun. It's cool, it's awesome, terrifying, amazing, and just like so many other adjectives, but rarely does that become fun for me. And I think that is an important note for me as a reader, that generally, and this is not, this is a blanket statement, it doesn't apply individually. Generally, I don't find science fiction to be fun. There have been some books that I've described as fun, I'm sure, and if you go back through my reviews talking about the various science fiction books that I've read, I'm sure I've mentioned the word fun in several of them, probably most of them even. As a whole, I don't find them to be fun in that same way, and that is something that I love about the fantasy genre, even when it's dark. There's definitely some fantasy books that I have read and enjoyed that are not fun, but generally I tend to have fun with my fantasy a lot more than I do with science fiction. I love learning about the science fiction. I love learning how they're building the world, what they're doing, the different approach to world building that they have with science fiction. That's cool. That's interesting to me. I love seeing it in action. I love seeing the science and the way that it is incorporated, even if it's pseudoscience or it's just something completely fake and made up. I still enjoy that aspect of it. But the reality of it is that it loses its funness for me. And I don't understand how that can quite be the case, because there's definitely some fantastic books that are very enjoyable, that are very interesting, that I am engaged with from the beginning to the end. But there's sometimes they're just not fun. There's a lot that of science. There seems to be more science fiction that I enjoy without finding it fun. And again, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm reading the wrong sci-fi books. I don't know. But that's kind of the broad generalization that I have noticed for myself reading science fiction, is I just don't find it to be fun that often. The other thing I think is that it can oftentimes also get lost in its themes and its explorations, and then it sets the story to the background. And I think that is a major negative for me, a major detractor from my enjoyment from my having fun with the story, because so often the story, well, for one, the story is the most important thing for me. That's what I read stories for, is the story. And oftentimes the themes tie into that. Oftentimes the exploration of certain ideas and concepts that ties into the story, and it should. But I find a lot that science fiction kind of sometimes sets the story aside, and in order to play with the science, in order to do these cool things, explore these cool concepts. And that's cool, it's interesting, but it removes the story from it, and story should always be first, in my opinion. That's to me, story is the most important part of a story. If there is not a story to the story, then there's no reason for the story to exist. And I that can maybe be a little bit confusing. I think if you've talked to me at all, or listened to my videos at all or anything like that, then that might make a little bit more sense, because I've clarified what I mean by that in previous videos. And so basically, I want there to be a story first, and that needs to be the most important. And I think I would tend to find sci-fi stories that I enjoy more when they are story focused and not science focused. That being said, I often don't enjoy the stories in the science fiction books. I don't find the stories to be fun in that same way, whereas I enjoy the concepts and the explorations and stuff like that a lot more. The other thing with that, and that it goes hand in hand with that, is that I often feel like science fiction is more agenda driven than fantasy is. Not that fantasy can't be, not that science fiction always is, but it tends to be a lot more, they're focusing on some agenda, and I don't love that. Again, the story needs to come first before any agenda. If you're just writing an agenda driven story, whether that's political agenda, whether that's religious agenda, doesn't matter what it is, if you're trying to force people to think some certain way with your story, I'm far less likely to enjoy it or to have fun with it, especially. And so I think that really is where I think that really encapsulates the majority of my thoughts on the sci-fi genre. And of course, I haven't read everything. I'm not the most well-read science fiction reader, but I wanted to make this video as kind of a close to this chapter of BookTube that I've been doing, which has been, I've done at least 4 science fiction videos, counting this one, maybe more than that, a short span of time, as well as several reviews that have been science fiction for science fiction books and stuff like that. And so I'm kind of using this as a way to close that chapter and continue moving forward with some other videos. It's been great to talk about the sci-fi that I've been doing. And I am definitely not going to stop talking about science fiction, but it's just something that I've noticed, and I wanted to use this as a close, and I wanted to actually put my thoughts out as a whole, and I'm sure my thoughts are going to change and continue to grow and everything as I continue reading more science fiction. But for now, that's kind of just the idea that I had for this video and that I wanted to present. Basically, this is just what I've noticed about science fiction within myself as a reader. And you don't have to agree with me. I'd hope that we'll be able to have a good discussion about this, and if you have some book recommendations that you find to be fun, that are science fiction and not science fantasy, that are just like actual science fiction that are really fun, I would love to hear those, because I'd love to put those on my TBR and try and get to some of those, because I do want to continue trying out more science fiction and trying to learn more about the genre. There's definitely some more of the major important moments of science fiction that I have not yet read and that I need to read. And so I've got a long ways to go in my journey through science fiction, but I have been enjoying it. I'm not having a ton of fun with it, but I've been enjoying it, and that seems like a bit of an oxymoron, but it's not. It can definitely happen where you can enjoy and appreciate things without having fun with them. So anyways, that is this video. I don't know how long it's been. I hope that it wasn't too rambly. I'm going to get this edited and uploaded so that you guys can see this, and then we post videos every Monday and Thursday, and our social media is linked in the description down below. We'll see you guys again soon. Stay warm.